Hi, welcome to the Dairy Hour podcast, where rural charm meets personal growth. Join us as we milk every moment for wisdom, self-improvement, and mental wellness. I'm your host, Val Lavigne, a rural dairy farming mom with a passion for filling hearts while never forgetting to fill my own cup. Get ready for insightful conversations, empowering tips, and a splash of fun and laughs, of course. Let's cultivate growth, nourish our minds, and embrace the journey together. This is the Dairy Hour podcast, where every episode is a breath of fresh air and the inspiration you need to be your best self.
Up on a dairy farm, and I was actually thinking about this before we jumped on. I was like, how long have I known Vale? And I'm like, well, I guess I don't ever remember not knowing Vale, but I haven't known her my whole life. So like, I don't know if that defines it well enough, but I always grew up, helping on the farm. And as your mom, my dad was involved in a lot of stuff outside the farm. So I got a lot of really great opportunities to see off the farm jobs, but are still related to the dairy industry. So exploring that, I learned that I really liked food and the relationship of like educating people about food, specifically dairy. So I had originally thought I'd want to do food science. So I went to Cornell, and then I realized I didn't want to be in a lab all day. I kind of wanted to experience the consumer facing side of things. So that's when I found dietetics. So I do have a degree in animal science, but then I went on to finish my requirements for dietetics, which, I have my credentials as a registered dietitian. So today I work primarily as a instructor at our local community college's 2-year nutrition program. And then I also do consulting. And then of course we have the farm as well. And I have the kids, and, as like with many people, I'm on a fitness journey. So I got lots of stuff going on.
Awesome. Yeah. So many of you that have listened to the podcast for a while, or if you haven't heard the episode, Abby's sister, Emma Swarthout, was actually on with her friend Kelsey O'Shea, I guess a few months back now, talking about that crazy triathlon marathon things that they do. Abby, I think you're the OG triathlete, aren't you? Did you do it before Emma did?
So little side trail, Becca, who is she's one of the twins right below me. Emma's the youngest. She actually started doing it, and then she left for the Peace Corps. And so Becca got me into it. So when she left, I needed a new buddy. So that's when I incorporated Emma into the folds. And Emma kind of took it to a new level. Sometimes I feel like I'm not a legit triathlete because of Emma's caliber of racing. But then I remind myself, I'm like, what are you talking about? I did a 70.3 last summer, and I have 2 kids. Like, I'm getting stuff done just differently. So
100%.
Yeah.
And Emma doesn't have kids. She only has cats. So she's got more time for that.
We like it that way, though, because we have a lot of kids and they take a lot of transportation to their extracurriculars. And Emma is really great for that because she is available. And she, like our one niece, she's going to be 14. So she's not old enough to drive, but she's at an age where she has a ton of stuff going on. So it's great because Emma can take her to her track meets and bring her home and all that stuff.
Perfect. Shout out to our dear buddy, Emma. And if you haven't realized, Abby has a ton of siblings. So they range from older than me to way younger than us. And Abby and I think we're the closest in age, I believe.
Yeah, I think.
Does that make sense?
I think you fall right between Hannah and I. So you're like in between.
Okay.
Us.
I knew I was right in there somewheres. But awesome. Well, I'm really excited. And you talked about knowing us, or us knowing each other for a long time. And yeah, I think my mom got involved with local checkoff when I was maybe 8. So, I mean, no big deal, but like 25 plus years we've probably known each other. So
yeah, and I think the big thing,
gosh, that makes sense.
I'm sure within other industries, it's a little different, but in the dairy industry, a lot of people just bring their kids with them. It's almost like an unspoken thing with the parents. Like if you're going to leave, you have to take one of the kids with you type of a thing. So I think there is just a lot of like, just going to the board meetings or making a board meeting trip into a family trip, lots of those. So
yes. Yeah. But it's good. I've met awesome people like you that I wouldn't trade for the world. So here we are, right?
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't have gotten into dietetics if it wasn't for all the off-farm stuff that my parents are involved in, because that's how I met my first dietitian. Like, so when the Dairy Ambassador program used to be the Dairy Princess program, and I was on the state court, well, I should take that back. My aunt is a dietitian, but she works in a school setting, so I never really knew that dietitians could do different stuff. And so when we went to the unveiling of the giant cup of hot chocolate in New York City, a Dane had contracted a dietitian to do a news segment on the benefits of vitamin D in milk, especially during wintertime. And I met her and I like had an aha moment. I'm like, wait, your job is really cool. And I think this might be what I want to do.
This sounds awesome. Let's do that. That works. And you don't have to milk the cows every day.
Well,
so
it's
I
funny
guess that's a bonus.
because right, that was my thing. I don't mind milking cows, but you know how most farmers are like, I work with cows because I don't like people, or I don't enjoy people. I enjoy animals more than the cows. I'm like, oh no, I enjoy people. So I'm fine with doing a little bit of farming, and a little bit of this. I don't need to be doing it, but I don't mind milking cows. It's just, I don't want to do it every single day for 40 years.
I mean, that's a fair point. That works. Definitely.
Right.
So let's dig in. So balancing a career, being a dietitian, being a mom, being, I guess, part-time dairy farmer, how do you balance all of those things and manage your time effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it's like with anything, you have to prioritize, and you're never going to be able to do everything 100% of the time. It's more so whatever you're doing at that time, trying to put 100% into it. So before we had kids, I actually had 3 jobs. I was teaching, consulting, and I had a grant through New York State with like a nutritional program. So a lot of it, like I have had to give stuff up and change things as our family has changed. But I also feel like growing up in a family where like not only were we running a dairy farm, but my parents were overly involved in the community and also other industries, like being on the boards and stuff. So I always kind of grew up with that, being very productive with your time, always just, involved in stuff. So I think that helps me feel not as stressed and more like empowered by doing all this different stuff. But I definitely have had to change stuff as I have the kids. Like I work a little bit less on consulting so that I only have to send the kids 3 days a week to daycare. And, hopefully when they're in school, maybe then I can focus on my business a little bit more. But it's definitely just kind of adjusting and accepting like this is where I am in my phase of life and they're only little ones. And that time's important to me. And I am fortunate that I have a job where I can do a little bit of both. And I've found it to be a good balance for me, but everybody's different. It's not like a perfect combination. And definitely some weeks are more chaotic than others, but it works for us. And naturally, being the wife of a dairy farmer, it's not like my husband can step down, or scale back. So it's kind of like just one of us has to just change a little bit. But I'm okay with that.
Definitely. And I think that's a really good part of having a well-balanced relationship with your husband and being able to see where those needs need to be met and, what changes you can and can't make within your family dynamics. So that's really important. So sticking with the kids and knowing that you love to post on social media about, making food exciting for kids, including your kids in, picking healthy foods, things like that. So what inspired you to begin starting to make those healthy, fun foods for your kids?
Yeah, so it kind of started before I even had kids. So as we talked about, I have a lot of siblings, and my younger brothers weren't even teenagers yet when my oldest sister started having kids. So there's always been kids around. And so I've always enjoyed being with kids. And when I was in school finishing my dietetic requirements, I more gravitated to the family community nutrition side of things. And so I worked at WIC when I first got out of school, which was great. I got to not only work with a lot of families, but I got to work with the population that probably need dietitians the most. Just they have a lot more barriers to overcome to achieve their nutritional goals, or just different barriers, and don't always have access to a dietitian. So that was a really great experience. And then I rolled into a different job where I actually worked with UPK programs in the Rochester School District, the city of Rochester. And I helped them. It was a grant through the New York State Department of Health where we incorporated cooking and learning about food into their UPK curriculum. So helping the teachers like learn how to incorporate food into math and science and even history and, cultural things. And then I usually had a very hands-on assembly style food activity that they could do right there in the classroom. And that I really, really loved and enjoyed. And then of course I had the nieces and nephews. And so I was already doing stuff with them. So when I was getting ready to have kids, it was more so something that I was really looking forward to because I already knew that I enjoyed it a lot, which if you don't enjoy cooking and you don't enjoy food, you might be like throwing up in your mouth a little bit because you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like overwhelming and super stressful. But for me, even as a kid, I would my mom would get cooking magazines and I would go through and circle the recipes that I wanted to make. And I would write a grocery list for her. And then she would go and buy them. And I would even tell my dad, if you let me leave the farm early, I will make dinner. And there was even one time where it might've been a couple times actually, I was like, I'm going to make a menu for us to follow. And I made a menu and put it on the fridge. And then I'd get so mad when people didn't follow the menu. So it's always been something that just is kind of my bread and butter. So being able to share that with my kids is amazing. And I realize some people don't naturally have that or love that, which is why I'm like, oh, it'd be a really great opportunity to share on social media because it could give people ideas or show them, it might not be as scary as you think having your kids in the kitchen with you. So I guess that's kind of just where it came from. It's something that's always been kind of ingrained in me, and we kind of just bleeds over into our parenting, and it's gone really well. I mean, you definitely have days where it's chaotic because kids are chaotic and drama filled, but you have to eat every day. So even if one experience doesn't go as well, you're like, well, I keep having experiences every day that I can make positive for my kids because they have to be fed. So
no matter the chaos, the kids still got to eat. So we got to figure something out. So that's definitely a way of looking at it. So do you want to give us some, creative ways that you incorporate those fun, healthy foods into your kids' diets every day, whether it be from snacks, dinners? What are some of your go-to fun things to do with your kids?
Yeah. So a lot of times I feel like with social media, it can be a blessing and a curse. And especially if you're not really into food prepping and feeding kids, it's not your niche or whatever, it can be really stressful because you see all these moms on there being like, oh, cut shapes out of your sandwiches and, your fruits and stuff, which is great, but it's not realistic. And so really when it comes to creativity, I'm not so much as let's turn this food into something, cool, some cool shape or something like that. Not that you can't. I'm more so, I like to bring my kids shopping with me. My kids come grocery shopping with me. I have them put stuff in the cart. I ask them, usually what we do with fruits and veggies is I have, snacking fruits and veggies, and then fruits and veggies I buy that I have an actual purpose for. So I let them pick out the snacking fruits and veggies, and then they help me put groceries away, and just having them a part of that process. And then sometimes I don't even have to ask my 5-year-old. I'll ask him, what do you want me for dinner? And we'll talk about it. But sometimes he'll just be like, Mom, can we make this for dinner? I'm like, sure, that's fine. And most of it, when you think about creativity, doesn't have to be some, turning food into arts and crafts. Most of it's just being creative with my schedule and what I can do with my kids and food. How does that look? Does that look like if I am a meal prepper on Sundays because I work and we don't get home till 5? Is that having my kids help me do that on Sunday or come shopping? Or maybe they don't come shopping because you're going grocery shopping is my alone time and I don't want them with me. So maybe that's something different. Maybe when you get home, they help you put stuff away, Or maybe you guys have a cooking magazine and you have your kids look through it with you and you're like, hey, let's pick one thing out of here that we're going to make that looks cool. We'll put it on the grocery list and then we'll make it sometime this week. The other thing is too, is not making your kids afraid of leftovers. I have so many people that I actually am going to go on like a little bitter side note. So growing up, we lived off of leftovers. We loved leftovers. It was great. Well, my brothers, who are a lot younger than us, don't like leftovers. And I'm like, Mom, what is going on here? You made us eat leftovers all the time. And now she'll be like, well, I don't like, if we're at a family gathering, she's like, I'm not going to take anything home because your brothers won't eat anyways. They don't like leftovers. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, that's not how we were raised. But I am really just like, if you had a nice, healthy, balanced dinner the night before and your kids want the leftovers for breakfast, feed it to them for breakfast. Like this whole stereotype, you can't have, leftover this for breakfast because that's weird. It's like, well, if it has fruits and veggies and grains and dairy, why not? If you're not a morning person and, it's better to eat something than not have anything at all, or you don't have time to make stuff, why not have leftovers? So also dispelling those stereotypes are important too. But also too, like, even just taking the basics like pizza. We love pizza in our house and keeping it super creative. You don't have to have just sauce and cheese, like adding veggies to it and having your kids help add. A lot of times with kids, barriers, it's similar with adults too. If you're not familiar with it, you're scared of it. So when you can have kids be incorporated in some process, whether it's shopping, putting it together, helping you cook, serving it, any step along the way where they can become more familiar with something is building a positive association with food. So if the first time they see a food is only when you set the plate in front of them on the table, it's probably not going to go that well, unless it's something they're super familiar with and eat all the time. So whenever you're talking about like introducing new foods or keeping it creative, it's really about keeping the kids involved. Kids have a very natural creative spark. So when you have them involved, just let them go wild with their imagination and they'll come up with tons of fun stuff to do with their food. And just stay open-minded. Don't focus on the don't do that, don't do this. Use redirection and focus on what they can have, things like that. And that'll really help you. I feel like sometimes people are like, unless I have a planned thing that I'm going to make, I feel like going into the kitchen with the kids is stressful. And it's like, well, you don't have to have that. You can kind of just go in there to make a snack. Start with making a snack. If preparing a meal with the kids is too much, start by having them help you make snacks. And that can, baby steps, of course, because it can be overwhelming if you don't do it all the time.
I know I was getting a little bit overwhelmed listening to you, and I guess with 3 kids, that just seems like a daunting task, but definitely I like your advice of starting simple, starting with a snack, going that way and trying to just encourage that creativity. So what are some of your family's go-to like creativity snacks and meals that you guys do make together?
Yeah. So, and even like with kids, it doesn't even have to be as much, coming into the kitchen and making something. Even just having you role model eating in your house will help them learn, right? Because they watch everything. And so even with my son at this point, he's not quite 5. And I mean, he can do some pretty basic cooking for himself. He can make himself sandwiches. He knows where the food and, in the fridge, like he can get himself out a yogurt or a cheese stick and fruits and veggies. He can make himself a bowl of cereal, things like that. And so, don't be afraid to, let your kids, if they have like a go-to, like I love making yogurt dips because they are super packed with protein and they have, carbs in there too, along with all the other, vitamins and minerals. And they pair really well with things, and you can make them sweet or savory. So again, if you have multiple kids and they have, different preferences, you can have them mix, even if you just have your own little cup for each kid and they can season it the way they want. And then they can pair it with their fruit or veggie or cracker or whatever they want. I really love yogurt because I have a lot of like stomach issues as far as like heartburn and GERD. So I use yogurt a lot just to neutralize the pH of things. So yogurt is a huge, huge versatile ingredient in our household. And the kids really like it. I also really like it for bedtime snacks because it's a pretty high protein, high carb snack. So it's pretty filling. And especially if you're doing like whole fat yogurts and stuff, the kids, it's pretty satisfying for them. And, you know, like I said, my son can actually get it out himself and scoop out his own yogurt. So it's very empowering for him and he feels like he's managing himself. So I would say yogurt's probably the biggest go-to for us because, again, you can buy it in like a bulk container and you can do a lot of different things with it. So it's super handy.
Very cool.
I actually just
sorry,
I was going to tell you there were a few weeks ago. So background, I had my gallbladder removed last fall. So the past like 6 months, I've been on a very low fat diet. And so my son has been having a lot of fun helping me remake recipes that are like lower fat. So we came up with this cinnamon bun it's like super yogurt heavy. Like we do not use any butter. We literally, the filling is yogurt. So I put yogurt in the actual dough when I make it. And then I spread yogurt on it like you would spread butter. And then I do like the cinnamon and the sugar. And then this, the drizzle on top also has yogurt. So I was laughing to myself and I was like, yeah, we really like yogurt because we definitely take it to maybe an overextensive level in our house.
That doesn't have yogurt in it already. Let's add some yogurt. See where we can sneak that yogurt in there. That works. I mean, as a dairy farmer, I'm all for adding yogurt, cheese, all that stuff to anything. So bring it on. So what I was going to ask is, you know, you mentioned earlier about, you know, kids being picky and like not eating specific things. What is your tip for someone who is struggling to get their kids to try those different foods? You know, not just eat the same thing all the time.
Yeah, no, I would say that's probably my biggest question, I guess you could call it, from parents working in like family nutrition. And a lot of it comes back to, and this is, I mean, it's helpful even with kids that aren't generally picky eaters. A lot of it comes back with consistency and keeping a positive eating environment. Don't be the food police. Portion sizes. I have a lot of times I'll tell people it's really helpful if you serve something they really, really like paired with something you're trying to make them learn to like. And they'll usually respond back with, you know, they just eat what they like and then they're full and don't want. So going back to portion sizes too, people need to remember, you know, 3 servings for an adult is a different ounce amount than what it is for kids. So staying within that portion size so that you're encouraging them. And it's also too, if it's a food that's kind of intimidating to them because it's new, a bigger portion size is also going to come across as more overwhelming. And it is hard with kids because they don't communicate like adults. So when they're upset about something, they wouldn't say, you know, oh, I'm just like really overwhelmed by this food because I've never had it before. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to, you know, lash out dramatically and, you know, cause problems. But so really it's, you know, focusing on portion size, pairing it with something they really, really like, with something they're learning to like. And I tell people all the time, it takes at least 22 introductions to that food before it becomes familiar to them. That's not if they like it or not. That's what they would consider as a familiar food. And even with my daughter, she just recently started liking grapes. I literally have been putting grapes on her plate for over a year, and she only recently started eating them. So it takes a while and it takes consistency and the role modeling too. So I really like to promote family style eating. And it comes back to that, right? Like naturally when people think family style eating, it's sitting around a table, dishes are in the middle, everybody gets served like the same food. And that goes back to everybody gets served the same food. When you start catering too much to everybody, it starts building up different habits. So you really want to try to stick to as much as you can. Whatever you're making, that's what we are eating. You don't have to eat it. And I also just don't it's all smoke and mirrors with kids. It's very psychological. And my husband will joke all the time. He's like, you're straight up lying to your kids. And I was like, yes, I know that. And I'm okay with it. Like if I don't like a food, I will not tell them that I don't like a food. I will say nothing, or I will say I am learning to like it. Because really with food, you don't want to put your food biases on your kids. You want to provide them kind of a clean slate in a positive environment to develop their own relationship with food. So when you're eating, you really want to make sure, like when I put my kids' plates together, I literally just put a little bit of everything that we made on the plate. I don't say anything. I don't ask them how much. I will just put it in front of them and walk away. And sometimes having that buffer between where they have that alone time with their food, where I walk away to go get my plate before I come back to sit next to them, allows them to have that space with their food where they're like, because sometimes if they look to you for a reaction and you like look at them, things go south. So really just say nothing, do something, nothing. And even when they eat their food, don't praise them. Don't say, oh my gosh, you ate all your carrots. That's awesome. Or don't say, oh, you didn't eat this, because it's not wrong, but you're teaching them to associate external cues with how they're feeling with their food in their belly. And you want to teach them to get internal cues. So if they eat all their carrots, maybe instead of saying, oh my gosh, you ate all the carrots, you could be like, oh, so what do you like best about your carrots? Or what color were they? Or did you like them with the yogurt sauce? Or did you like them without? Just asking questions about their food so they can think more about like, why do I like carrots? Why did I eat them all? And then it's really rewarding because once they get to be like my son's, 5, and some of my nieces and nephews a little bit older, it's so fun to watch them put together a plate for themselves, because they might be, when they get the pasta salad, they might, leave a little more of this and take a little more of that. But for the most part, they'll put together their own plate and it will be pretty balanced and they're pretty happy with it. And I also am not a big person of, you need to stay at your plate until you eat it all. That is I see as a very archaic tool, and it promotes a very negative eating environment. And it's teaching them to look for external cues on their eating habits. Whereas, if they don't eat it, they don't eat it. And then, if they're hungry, we usually do a bedtime snack, and that's like a nice buffer so that people aren't going to bed hungry, but it's also not a crutch. It's more so just like already planned into our night. Like we always have a bedtime snack. So it's not, oh, we're going to have this because you didn't eat your dinner. Because even if they do eat dinner, we still have the bedtime snack. And the bedtime snack is usually a fruit with a yogurt or a cheese with a yogurt or something like that.
That's definitely a new way of thinking of things. And I've been hearing a little bit more about that type of approach more recently. And that is definitely a new way of looking at things, because when we were kids, it was you finish your plate. Otherwise, you're sitting there until you're done. So that's definitely a new way of looking at things, and could definitely, make a more positive eating environment for them and help them, learn to be more self-reliant on that. So I really like that new way of looking at things. So, you were saying about you having cut a lot of fat out of your diet recently. So how do you navigate food preferences, with different dietary needs within the family?
Yeah, it's funny because obviously I'm a farmer, and as you know, a lot of our farmers feel extremely passionate about whole milk products, which they are delicious. But I really have to encourage them, like we can't disservice ourselves, because you have to be careful when you're putting that much emphasis on whole milk. You're making it seem like our other percent fat products are kind of like not as great. And one, we need to make sure consumers know that it doesn't matter what spectrum of fat you choose, you're still getting those essential nutrients. It's just the fat that's different. And two, there are legitimately people out there like myself that can still have dairy because we offer lower fat options. So I have to remind people of that sometimes. But yeah, as a dietitian, that's another thing we come across. A lot of times we're working with people because they have very specific dietary restrictions. So a lot of the ones, I come across are people that maybe are working with their kids that might have a milk allergy, or maybe people are lactose intolerant, even just teaching people the difference. Milk allergies are actually extremely rare in adults. They're a little less rare in kids and a little more common in infants, but generally speaking, majority of people will grow out of it. So even just helping people navigate that, like if they are diagnosed with infants with a milk allergy, how they reintroduce that, going forward. So the big thing I always tell people, no matter what your dietary, accommodations need to be, is working with a healthcare professional. And if you are working with a dietitian, that dietitian needs to be incorporated with your healthcare team. And a lot of that comes because, you don't know what side effects, symptoms you might have from whatever dietary issues you have to change and whatever. For example, a lot of times people with celiacs, just because it's been so long before they get diagnosed, they might have different nutrient needs that need to be tailored because they're deficient because of the lack of absorption of things. So it's really important that you're not self-diagnosing and trying to work it out yourself. Getting a healthcare team involved is very important. But a lot of times too, when you're talking about it in a home setting, is making sure the whole entire family is on board as a unit. Again, going back to that family style dining, a lot of times if you have a kid or an adult that has celiac disease, for example, just a general preference, you're not going to have gluten in the house at all because of cross-contamination, but it also makes it a lot easier because there's not this stash of food this kid can't eat and it's like off limits. You know what I mean? It's really nice when it's like the kid knows that they can go get themselves a snack out of the fridge and they can have that. Obviously, there's education that has to be done with the individual when they're going outside the home to eat, like to a gathering or, to school or whatever. But I also like to follow that with other things as well. For example, my kids have a lot of bowel issues, so they're not as regular and they have very inconsistencies with their bowels. So we work with a GI doctor, and there's certain foods that trigger their bowel issues more than others. So instead of having those foods in the house being like, you can have them today, but you can't have them now, we just don't have them in the house. And there's other, for us, a lot of times it's foods that they wouldn't really need to eat anyways, like granola bars and, cured meats tend to be a really bad trigger for my son. So we just don't have them in the house. And again, it's all to promote that positive eating environment. When you're focusing more on foods that you can't have, or you have food in the house that they can't have, it again makes that negative association with food, and it makes food more stressful, more anxiety built up around it. So I also tell, a lot of times we talk to moms and they're like, yeah, I have my secret chocolate stash, or mommy and her wine or whatever. And I really try to tell people that I'm like, not that you can't have your vices, but really discourage that around the kids, because again, everything sends a message to them. So either it's a community chocolate where it's like everybody gets to have some sometimes, or it's something that you keep under lock and key and you do not have it unless the kids are in bed, because you're teaching them that you have to use food that maybe isn't as great for us as a coping mechanism. And again, not that you can't do that, because I definitely do that. But we're trying to teach kids their own relationship with food. So everything you do is sending a message to them. So even to the point, like, I like dill pickles and my husband likes sweet pickles. So my kids do not call them dill pickles and sweet pickles. They call them mommy's pickles and daddy's pickles, because they literally pick up, we don't call them mommy's pickles and daddy's pickles. They have named them that because that's how closely they watch our preferences. So it's not to say, you can't have your stash of something. It's just, you have to be very conscious of the way you view food and how you're putting that onto your kids.
That's really definitely insightful and kind of crazy to hear it coming from you, those little things that you do kind of hide away, or, sneak some chocolate every once in a while, things like that. And I 100% have a stash of chocolate that I don't allow my kids to have. So, and they're aware of it and they know that it won't be pretty if they break into mommy's chocolate. But I definitely see where that all is coming from. And I've definitely learned a few things about, different eating habits and eating styles throughout the house today. Do you have any other tips, tricks for moms trying to navigate their way through everything?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is too, it sounds contradictive because I'm like, don't be the food police, but then I'm telling mom not to have her stash of chocolate. But the other thing is too, it's like, okay, fine. Say you have your stash of chocolate and the kids know about it. Maybe also adding in other coping mechanisms for the kids. So, hey, mommy had a really intense day. I'm going to go on a 10-minute walk. Like incorporating other coping mechanisms that you're teaching them so that, you're like balancing it out a little bit. So that's
Mommy's going to go on a 10-minute walk while eating a bar of chocolate.
Right, because it's also important to teach them that nobody's perfect. So, but your kids will be the first ones to point out your flaws. So I want to tell you that too.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with kids. Oh yeah, the biggest thing with kids is really just the role modeling, and going back to that, it takes a village. So even if you aren't crazy about food and teaching your kids, about food, get other people involved. Maybe there is other people in your family or close friends that do really enjoy cooking. And that could be a really great bonding experience with them. For us growing up, and when I say us, I mean my siblings and I, 4-H was a really, really great outlet for us. So not only were we homeschooled, so we relied on 4-H a lot for some of our, school projects and things, but it also allowed us to learn cooking from just a different person that invested time in us. So just learning about their history with food, their family recipes. We got to cook with other kids. Anytime we did like a public presentation, I would always do mine on food. And it's funny because how many times do you hear kids talk about, like, parents will say, I told my kids this so many times, but it wasn't until they heard the exact same thing from somebody else that they actually listened to it for the first time. So it's the same idea with active learning. Getting other people involved is a great learning opportunity for your kids too. You don't have to put it all on yourself. It can kind of be like a community village contribution.
Like that. And actually, when you were talking about that, before you even said 4-H thing, the 4-H thing popped into my mind too, that there's a lot of different opportunities for food science and just cooking in general through 4-H. So shout out to your local 4-H organization. If you're not a part of it with your family, you totally should be. So Abby, I like to switch at this point into some just fun questions, just to get to know you a little bit better. So what is your favorite book?
So I've heard you ask this before because I don't remember if we said this before or after we started recording. But I have I'm a faithful listener to Vale's podcast. And I feel like this isn't a fair question because I feel like it's more of a genre. It's not fair to make someone pick a favorite book. But I am more of a history buff, and I'm not fictional. Like, it has to be real. Like, I'm one of those people that gets super mad when I read a book and then watch the movie and they changed it. It gets my,
that does make sense.
So one of my favorite books that I've recently read was The Boys in the Boat. I don't know if you are familiar with that one, but it follows the story of the crew team from the University of Washington through when they got to the Olympics in Berlin and won gold. And the book is really well written. And then they turned it to a movie, which naturally you have to like pare it down because it's a movie. And the movie was beautiful, but I couldn't get past how many things they changed from the book. Like, I was watching it and I told my husband, I'm like, yeah, she's definitely supposed to be a brunette. I don't know why they cast her as a blonde. So
how dare she have
about that? But I know. But I really love also sports autobiographies. That's kind of a toxic trait of mine. There's been a lot of really great women-focused autobiographies that have come out by a lot of like famous runners and triathletes. So Emma and I and a few other friends have kind of been binge listening to them. And then we kind of have our own little improv book club on them. So I guess that's kind of my genre. I don't want to make the other books I really like feel bad by picking one over the other.
I mean, that is a fair answer. I'll take that. See, and it's funny, you like the real history, like you don't like things to be fictional. I'm a like fictional history gal. I don't like to read things necessarily that are like super intense or too much to think about. I like to shut my brain off when I read. So I'm like which I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but the last couple years I've been on an 1800s England, London specifically, like kick.
Ooh.
Of like the titles and all the different things. And I can just read them and read them and read them, and I love them. And they're not anything to do with real life.
Branch out a little bit. I'll have to branch
There's
out.
nothing better than sitting in my bathtub with my 1800s Britain novel.
You're inspiring me,
so, well, good. I can send some suggestions your way, you know. I'm always here for that. So, next question, coffee or tea?
I do not drink either, actually. Because of my stomach issues, I don't really consume caffeine or alcohol. So
what's your go-to drink?
I'd probably say chocolate milk. I cannot tell you, when I had my daughter, I had a birthing plan that I gave my doula, and on it said that I wanted chocolate milk after I had the baby. So she literally I went into labor in the middle of the night. So she brought chocolate milk with her because she didn't know if the cafeteria was going to be open. And so literally after I had my daughter, I had this ice cold chocolate milk waiting for me. It was amazing.
That's amazing. That's goals right there. And she wasn't even paid to say that. That's the thing. Like, yeah, I love it.
No, I joke with some of my mom friends. I'm like, I know we're...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, we talk about all this science that we have on using chocolate milk as a recovery beverage for athletes. And I'm like, I think we're missing a nice little niche of moms here using chocolate milk as postpartum recovery.
I know. I wish I thought of that. That would be perfect. Because now that I'm like working out consistently, like I look forward to my chocolate milk when I'm done working out. Like I don't think that I could like go on with my day if I don't have my chocolate milk after. So I'm here for that.
I hear ya.
So if you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you talk to them about?
So I've heard you ask this before, and I've thought about this one because it's like a hard one. I don't think I'd want to do somebody famous though. I think to be honest, I feel like I'd want to do somebody from my family, like several generations back. So in our family, we're like mutts. We have like a lot, like we're predominantly Irish from my mom's side, but we also have German, Native American, a lot of different like English backgrounds. And I'm like, so my mom's great grandparents came over during the potato famine from Ireland. And we recently went to Ireland last fall. And so we got like another historical perspective of what happened during that time, not just what you learn here in the United States. And I feel like, again, I really like history. I feel like if I could have dinner with like one of my relatives that was like going through that and be able to like get a picture in time of what their life was like, knowing, what their decisions would lead to as far as like, several generations, or even like my dad is I think he's a 5th generation farmer. Like going back to my grandpa that was the 1st generation farmer and like picking their brain, and seeing how different it was back then. I think that would be really cool.
That would be really cool. And knowing your family, like I can definitely see that. And I think you might be the first one that's come on here and called your family basically mutts, which is amazing. As far as like your heritage and things like that.
Maybe I should say crossbreeds. I don't know.
You're good. Well, I mean, the mutts thing leads into my next question, and I already know the answer to this, but dogs or cats?
Definitely dogs, but I do like cats. I just don't want to take care of them. The whole litter box thing is, but my daughter is obsessed with cats. So I think it's hilarious because my husband's like, we are never getting a cat. And I was like, you know what? In 5 years, when we end up getting a cat, I'm going to remind him of this.
If you want cats, honey, you go to Aunt Emma's and you play with her cats.
So my mom actually has 3 cats, and I'm not kidding you. I have put content on social media and people will comment on how tame my mom's cats are. They're like dogs. Like they have the demeanor of dogs. So the kids will just like pick them up and carry them around the house. Emma's cats, they only like Chris and Emma. So if you go to her house, you would think she was a liar. Like she didn't have cats because that's how sparse they make themselves. So Emma's cats are kind of not fair game. They are only Chris and Emma's, and they won't, when the kids come around, they're like, it's a no-go.
That's funny. Oh gosh. So what is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
I would probably have to say doing a full distance Ironman. That was just really out of my comfort zone. And I'm not like a fast athlete either. And I mean, once you get in, you've probably experienced this because I know you're getting into like competitions and stuff with your fitness stuff. Like once you get into the level of like competing and stuff, you see like really high caliber people and you start being like, wait a second, why am I here? But it's been the most amazing journey. And I'm really glad I did it because, you know, now as a mom, I don't get to work out as much. But because I have that past built up relationship with triathlon, it's a really great comfort space for me and a key part of my self-care. So I might not be able to race as much as like maybe my sister does, but I know that nothing will make me feel better than if I could go for like a really great swim or a nice bike ride or something like that, you know? I don't think I would be up to doing a full distance Ironman anytime soon. But I had a lot of people be like, you are crazy. And I really like looking back, I'm like, there are so many people, so many doubters. And even my dad, I have to be honest, my dad even took me aside and was like, do you really think this is the best idea? Like, this seems like a little much. And I was just like, yeah, Emma and I are going to do it. So yeah, probably that. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the first full distance Ironman, it's you swim 2.4 miles, then you bike 112 miles, and then you run a full marathon, which is 26.2 miles afterwards.
And I would have drowned in the swim. I wouldn't even make it to the biking or the running. So we're just going to put that out there. I will never do a triathlon because your girl can't swim. I'd be doggy paddling and going for it.
But I disclaimer, because people find out I'm a triathlete and they're like, oh, you must be an athletic person. I'm like, whoa, back up the bus. I have zero hand-eye coordination. That is why I swim, bike, and run, because I can't catch or throw anything with my hands or feet. So everybody has something different.
Yes. And I don't have hand-eye coordination either, which is why I ran track in high school and I did not play soccer or basketball or anything like that. So I did hurdle, which is a little bit of coordination, but I will preface with this, I was not the best hurdler in the world. So we'll leave it at that. My running days are pretty well past, though. My legs can't handle it anymore. But if you could travel, I just love this question. So I'm sure you've heard me ask other people this, but if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?
So I've always wanted to go to Nice, France, which they do have a rotating triathlon that Ironman does there. So ideally, I would love to go when Emma's racing, emphasis on Emma racing, because then I can enjoy the racing atmosphere, but I don't actually have to be the person racing. But I also don't travel well. I love the idea of going somewhere and submersing yourself in a new place, but I do not travel well. So if I travel, I ideally like to get there and stay in that spot. When we went to Ireland, we stayed in Dublin and then did all these bus day trips where there were like 13-hour days where you were traveling all over Ireland. It did not go well for me. That was not the greatest. But, you know, Emma, which she's been on the podcast, she's the opposite. She is a travel connoisseur. She can just turn and burn on all these trips that she goes on.
Yep. Well, I do love to travel, but I don't know if I could keep up with Emma on it. So we're going to leave that to her, and we'll live vicariously through her on some of that.
That's right.
Yeah, at this point, I like to ask a question that a previous guest from the podcast has left for a future guest. And so your question is, what is the biggest challenge you have overcome, and how has it helped you grow?
Oh, this one is a hard one.
I'm making you think deep.
To be honest, I would probably have to say starting my own business. So first of all, my husband, which I have not talked about him much on this podcast, so it probably makes me look like a really bad wife. But when I was at Cornell and I was trying to pivot to find something I liked, I was really resistant to going to another school and keep going to school. I was like, oh my word, like this, more schooling, like this is that. So I was trying to find some way I'm like to do what I want to do without having to do the schooling. And I just realized like you have to have your dietetic credentials if you want to be able to do what I do. And at the time, my husband and I were dating, and he was like, I know it seems like a lot right now, but when you think about big picture, you have like a 40-year career. Going to school for an extra like 3 to 4 years isn't that big of a deal. And you might as well do it now. Because like once people take a break from school, they don't always go back. And you know specifically what it is you want to do. So from the get-go, he was very pro like, get your dietetic credential. Like that is what you want to do. Like I know you'd be really good at it. So then when we got married, he literally supported me while I was in school. So he's been so great. And then he was pushing me the whole time, like, you should start your own business. Like you have a super big like niche and the whole agricultural food production from on the farm to plate. Like you should run with this. And I was like, oh my gosh, running my own business. Like that sounds awful. And we are already starting the farm. And in my mind, I'm like, this seems like crazy to have 2 startup businesses. Like this seems really irresponsible. And so it was a Christmas gift. He actually did the paperwork to make my business like its own legal entity and was like, here, like now you can like do it. And I was kind of like, yeah. And it's really just kind of taken off from there, just from, word of mouth and getting around. And I've just had some really unique opportunities and projects and, just a lot of growth. And so I like, honestly, it sounds cliche, but I honestly couldn't have done it without my husband. And it's something like if somebody had said back when I was starting my college journey, oh, someday you're going to have your own business, you're going to be a dietitian, I would think like, oh, like sounds great, but I highly doubt it. So yeah, I would have to say that.
That's a good one. And shout out to Hubs for being the supportive one and getting you through there. So I also like to leave our guests with a little bit of, what drives you, what motivates you. So a good inspirational quote that is something that you try to abide by every day.
Yeah. So I actually have a couple. I think it's an African proverb. It's, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I feel like no matter like what phase of life I find myself in, it might be a different group of people that I need, but I literally, like I talked about in the previous, answer to your question, I would not be where I am today if I didn't have the support of so many people that have invested so much time in. And I hope that I'm doing the same for others, but it's really about surrounding, especially as moms and farmers, like you need to surround yourself with great people. And I have so many close relationships to the point where if I'm off, they can tell I'm off. You know what I mean? And if I need help, I feel so comfortable being like, oh my gosh, guys, like I'm so done. Like I need this from you. And some people don't have that. So I realize I'm really blessed. But I also recognize that it's something that I truly need. Like, people shouldn't have to do stuff on their own. It really takes a lot of great relationships and building rapport with people and connections to be able to really thrive and excel. And that includes parenting. You need help from other people. You don't have to do it yourself. I mean, how many times have both you and I talked about grandma? So that one's really important. And then, of course, my family, I grew up very faith-based family, and we also have continued that with our family. So I really like, Bible verses and stuff. And my Nana's favorite one is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So I actually, when I did my Ironman training, I actually had that on a bracelet that I wore all the time, because she passed away shortly before Emma and I kind of started that journey. So that's one that I always keep pretty close and on my mind. So I think it's just a combination of things that keep me inspired, but those are just two little nuggets.
Good. I love some good inspirational nuggets, and I definitely agree with both of them. They're so important to, keep that perspective as you go through life. So you did mention having your own business. I know you're very active on Instagram. Do you want to plug where our audience can find you?
Yeah, so Instagram is kind of my bread and butter. So it's at Dairy Farmer RD. And of course, I'm always out and about, at different events and things like that. I don't have a podcast, so kudos to Vale for getting out there and doing that. That seems like a big task to me, but definitely on Instagram, message me, follow me. And yeah, thanks for having me today. It was a lot of fun talking all things dairy and mom and food.
Of course, things that are very important to us in life. Dairy farming, being a mom, and eating, because, not only is food good for nutrition, but food is just delicious in general. So that's good. And if people are interested in your business, they can find you. That's also at the Dairy Farmer RD.
Yeah, they can go there, or I do have a website at it's Dairy Farmer RD. But to be honest, a lot of the work I do is just, it's word of mouth and people emailing me and things like that. But if people want more information on different services that I provide, they could always message me on Instagram too.
Awesome. Abby, thank you so very, very much for coming on today. I've learned a lot. I'm sure that the audience has learned a ton by listening, and we really appreciate it. Maybe we'll have you on again in the future. So thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks.